Hey, it's Rich from Planet PE, and today we're going to have a look at the rules that you're going to be using when you're training to try and get the very most out of your training sessions. So today is all going to be about the principles of training. So if you're new to the channel, please make sure you like and subscribe. Make sure you use the comments to show any knowledge that you might have or that you might need from us. But let's get cracking on this topic, looking at the principles of training. So the principles of training are quite an easy thing to remember, but what you might find more difficult is how you're going to apply the knowledge. So where this actually comes in the course is it's in section B of your coursework, where you're going to be needing to use the principles of training alongside a method of training to show how you're going to implement them to get the most out of your training sessions. It's also going to be in your paper 1 exam, so we need to make sure that we're getting it. So as far as remembering it, what we're looking at is this acronym of SPORT and FITT. Now that'll all make sense in a second. So what they are is that the principles are the rules that we're going to live by, like I say, to get the most out of our training. And what the principles are is that they're the principles of specificity, progressive overload, reversibility, and tedium. So let's go through each one and then help us out so we know exactly what we've got to write in our coursework and in the exams. So specificity, what does that mean? Well, if you look at the word, the easiest thing to pick up out of that is specific. And that's what we're saying, is that your training is going to be specific either to your needs or the requirements of the activity you're training for. So for instance, if I was Usain Bolt and I'm a 100-meter sprinter, I don't need to go and train my agility. And the reason is that I don't use it. I run in a straight line, so therefore if I worked on agility, it would be completely pointless and a waste of my time. However, working on his speed would be very specific to his activity. So therefore using something like interval training would be a good idea. Where we need to think about with specificity is how you're going to actually achieve that. So you might want to think about the muscles that you're working. You might want to think about the duration that you're working for and matching the requirements of your activity. So for instance, if you had an activity that was start, stop, start, stop, something like interval training would be a good idea. If you were a games player, maybe using specificity, thinking, well, in a game of football, I walk, I run, I jog. Using specificity, I'm going to use the training method of fartlek training. So specificity is all about how specific you can make it to your activity or your needs. Now, progressive overload. Progressive overload is the P and the O in our SPORT acronym. And what that actually means is that we're going to gradually increase kind of how hard or how demanding the training is. And there are 4 ways that we can do that. So in progressive overload, we talk about the FITT principle. So FITT. And what that means is we've got frequency, intensity, time, and type. So basically, you can make your training more difficult or more rigorous or harder by training more often. So that's frequency. So we're going to train more days in a week. So week 1, I might train once a week. Week 2, I might be training twice a week. Week 3, I might be training 3 times a week, and so on. Intensity is basically making it harder. So can you lift more weight? Can you run further? Can you run up hills? So you've got to find a way of making it more difficult as far as the intensity. So basically making it essentially just tougher. We then got time. So time, just training for longer. So again, in my first training session, I might be only training for half an hour. In training session 2, I might be training for 32 minutes. In training session 3, it might be 35 minutes. All I'm doing is extending that time so that my body is under stress for a longer period of time. So therefore, there's going to be an adaptation of the body. So all of these ones about progressive overload, essentially all the principles of training are about making sure that we're testing the body, we're putting it under stress so that it is going to adapt to our training so we get fitter. The final one there is type. So I can make my training harder by changing the type of training I'm doing. Now that might be changing the method completely, but it might be just doing it slightly differently so that your body doesn't get used to what you're doing. because remember, we're talking about progressive overload, where we're going to be going up a set of stairs step by step. And that's what progressive overload means. We're not going from the bottom of the stairs to the top of the stairs. So if you started weight training, you're not going to go and lift the heaviest weight that is possible, because you're only going to injure yourself. So therefore, progressive overload is a gradual increase in the intensity of your training so that you don't get injured and so that you get the most out of your training. So that links to our next principle of training, which is reversibility. So reversibility is this idea where if I was to not train correctly, that I might go back to a previous stage of fitness. So let's say that I've been doing weight training and I'm really easily lifting 30 kilograms on the shoulder press, thinking, yeah, I'm bossing it, I'm smashing it. If you got injured, you wouldn't be able to lift for a period of time, and you might then not be able to do that 30 kilograms anymore, and you might go back to what you were like on, let's say, week 2. And what they say is that it's like a 3-to-1 ratio as far as gaining fitness to losing it. So you may have heard this idea, if you don't use it, you'll lose it. And with fitness, that is completely the case. So some of you, we've been locked down for a while, maybe haven't been as active, and you are maybe less fit than you were. Your cardiovascular fitness may not be as good. Your muscular strength may not be as good. And that's because of reversibility. We've actually trained less, we are less active, so your body is adapted to that by going back to a previous stage of fitness. The other way that might happen is that you get a bit bored with your training and you just stop. So anything about stopping training, anything about being injured is going to cause reversibility, and we want to avoid that, so that's why it's one of the principles of training. And the final one is tedium, and it is that link to boredom. So if I get bored of my training, if it's just monotonous, it's the same over and over and over again, then I'm not going to want to do it. So we've got to think about how we're going to try and spice up the training to make it maybe competitive. How are we going to maybe do it with other people? Are we going to use music to kind of motivate ourselves so that we don't become bored and just stop training and therefore experience reversibility? So those ones again, we've got specificity, progressive overload, reversibility and tedium, and the 4 ways that we can progressively overload were frequency, intensity, time, and type. So really quick and easy one. Hopefully you can use that in your coursework to then try and think, well, how am I going to hit each one of those different aspects? If you're not sure about the coursework, go back to my videos where I've looked at section B and section A separately, and hopefully you can then try and get the most out of planning a session and also maybe doing some sort of personal exercise program in the future. So thanks for watching, and I will see you again really, really soon. Stay safe. See you soon.